Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, speaking to you from the pulpit of our synagogue. This is the first of a two-part message entitled With Liberty and Justice for All, emphasis on the word all. If a rabbi could have a favorite Bible story, this one, the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, would be on my short list. It is a bit beside the point to ask a rabbi to identify a favorite Bible story. That is because the craft of the rabbi serving a congregation involves building bridges between our sacred traditions and the world we inhabit, to help us meet the challenges of today with the help of our timeless wisdom. We read the Bible on a regular schedule, and part of the art form of the traditional sermon is to plumb the significance of the particular text in our weekly Bible lectionary for the topics of the day that we need to face. It's a discipline. There are religious communities that do not structure their encounter with sacred texts in such a fashion. But as is the case with the genre requirements of the sonnet and the sonata, this discipline can be a supportive scaffolding for insight into the meaning of the classics of our tradition, not simply a straitjacket. Even so, once emancipated from the strictures of crafting a weekly message from the biblical hand that our lectionary deals me, I would nominate the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, Numbers chapters 27 and 36, as one of my favorites. It is a famous tale of daughters protesting the injustice of their exclusion from inheriting their deceased father's share of land, and God agreeing with the five sisters. In fact, I think that it is even deeper and richer than the now conventional treatment of the narrative illuminates. Let's review the story and its popular application, after which I will share what I believe is an untapped vein of ore that is still waiting to be mined. To return to the mandated calendar of our lectionary readings, the two parts of the story of the daughters of Zelophehad are in the Torah portions that we will be reading this and the next Sabbath. Accordingly, I will present my teaching in a two-part message this week and next. The story may be familiar, but it ought to be heard in its full biblical context. Near the end of their generation-long sojourn in the wilderness, the Israelites prepare for their entry into the Promised Land. In the book of Numbers, chapter 26, God commands Moses and the high priest Eleazar to take a census of the adult male Israelites. Quote, Kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael, all Israelites able to bear arms, chapter 26, verse 2. The purpose of the census is to prepare for the allocation of the land to the people. It will be by tribe, each tribe receiving a larger or smaller territory based on its population. Quote, among these enumerated, shall the land be apportioned as shares. With larger groups, increase the share. With smaller groups, reduce the share. Each is to be assigned its share according to its enrollment. Numbers 26, verses 53 and 54. To be clear, the tribal allotment was envisioned as corresponding to the number of adult males in each tribe. For this purpose, women and children did not count. It is also important to note that the land to be granted was thought of as belonging not to individuals, but to each family in perpetuity. Land was ideally inalienable. The intention of the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, is that a person could lease his ancestral holding but not sell it beyond reclamation. It would return to the family at the Jubilee every 50 years. Since, in pre-industrial society, land was the major source of wealth, this provision was meant to be a safety net against a family sinking into perpetual poverty. Many texts from Genesis through Deuteronomy reveal the patrilineal mindset of the ancient Israelites, namely, that inheritance customarily passed from a father to his sons. Along with their portions, the sons inherited the responsibility to provide for their unmarried sisters and their widowed mother. A corollary, important for us to know, since we will see that this corollary becomes crucial in the second half of the story, is that upon marriage, women become part of their husbands' households, and whatever they bring with them represents a transfer from their father's holdings to their husbands. Indeed, the bridegroom in those early days paid a dowry not to the bride, but to her father, showing that economically the groom and his clan were acquiring a portion of what had formerly counted as being part of the bride's father's holdings, but would be no longer. I am sorry if all this sounds mercenary today, but even in our days of emphasizing idealized romantic love leading to marriage, we still have a lively tradition of prenuptial agreements. We would be naive to think that economic considerations in marriages operated only during so-called primitive biblical times. The 5 daughters of Zelophehad had no brothers. They approached Moses and Eleazar and voiced their protest that the proposed inheritance would erase the memory of their deceased father. His holdings would be assimilated into those assigned to his brothers, uncles, or other male relatives. Please pay close attention to the specifics of their protest, because the common contemporary interpretation glosses over those specifics and thereby fails to plumb the full meaning of the Bible narrative. That was the protest that Moses relayed to God, verse 5. And God granted the correctness of the complaint. Quote, verses 6 and 7. The Lord said to Moses, "The plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You should give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them." Then God broadened the scope of this change. Rather than being a one-off, it was a new general law. Quote, verse 8, "Further, speak to the Israelite people as follows. If a man dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his property to his daughter." Powerful words. How to signify them? And now, the appropriation of this story, my endorsement and my critique. I came of age during the 1970s, a decade of profound dynamism within our religious denomination. North American feminism was influencing the younger generation, both women and men, in our communities. And a growing number of our elders were sympathetic to our goal of equalizing the status of women and men in our synagogues. In my student days, I was a charter member of a protest group, GROW, GROW, standing for Group for the Rabbinic Ordination of Women. Our goal was to challenge the traditionalism of our venerable rabbinical seminary, to convince its faculty senate to confer the professional degree of rabbi on qualified women. More effective than our youthful marching and chanting was the lobbying of our movement's professional association of ordained rabbis. By threatening to admit as members women ordained as rabbis at other school, the men of the Rabbinical Assembly successfully pressured the Jewish Theological Seminary to change in this definitional domain. And women have been ordained as rabbis in our denomination since 1985. We progressives thought that Judaism, properly understood, was on our side, that the core Jewish messages of liberation and equality under God would justify the dismantling of the male monopoly of religious authority. We set about reinterpreting sacred texts with the excitement of discovery coupled with the passion for righting old wrongs. Reimagining the matriarchs, Miriam, the judge Deborah, the prophet Huldah, and many other characters in Jewish history from the Bible through Golda Meir, then the Prime Minister of Israel, through the lens of our contemporary social agenda. In that atmosphere, viewing the 5 daughters of Zelophehad as feminist reformers was a natural move. After all, they protested a system in which women didn't count, and God agreed with them. That dovetailed neatly with our own sense that if the old-fashioned rabbis would not count women in the prayer quorum, the minyan, if reactionary seminary professors would not agree to ordain women for the rabbinate, then they were on the wrong side of true religion. That is the spirit that animates the illustration posted above. It comes from a Christian church in El Paso, Texas. Its caption, quote, "The request that changed the world," highlights the revolutionary impact of the protest of the 5 sisters, whose names were Machla, Noah, Chogla, Milka, and Tirzah. I, for one, am pleased that our religious stream has embraced the feminism of the last third of the 20th century and synthesized it with a dynamic, justice-oriented Judaism. But from the perspective of hindsight, and also from my research into the biblical notion of the meaning of a human life after that person has died, I would now say that the feminist reading of this biblical text is partially correct, but also incomplete. It misses a crucial aspect of what the daughters were saying. Moreover, the reading of this story as a tale of triumphant progressive change in Judaism, initiated by the 5 sisters, misses the meaning of the second half of the Bible story, as I shall explain in the conclusion of this 2-part message next week. First, let us understand the words actually chosen by the daughters without immediately lensing them through 20th century lenses. Quote, chapter 27, verses 3 and 4. "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction of Korach, and he has left no sons. Let not our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen." Well-chosen words. Separating the deceased Zelophehad from the faction of the mutinous Korach meant that no one could deny the daughter's claim on the grounds that their father had suffered the confiscation of his portion as penalty for mutiny. Then, having answered that potential challenge, they voiced their main argument. Denying his holding to his offspring would erase his name in Israel. that would constitute a tragedy that should be forestalled. Allowing his daughters to inherit would accomplish that goal to prevent such a tragedy. How did losing the connection between an Israelite's name and his holdings erase his name? And why was this a tragedy to be forestalled even by the untraditional departure of letting daughters inherit? We should understand that in all ages of history, people wonder about what, if anything, survives their physical death, and that religion is often the domain of the response to that desire for some sort of transcendence beyond one's final breath. The Bible did not yet have the familiar world to come, Olam Haba, of rabbinic and later eras of Judaism. Instead, it focused on three tangible posthumous survivals. A person could hope to have kin, descendants, remember him. He could have the land he had farmed be remembered as having been his family holding, and those who memorialized him could perform the appropriate rites of memorialization. Relatives, real estate, and ritual were the three R's by which our biblical era ancestors fortified themselves in facing their mortality. Realizing this, the words of the protest of the five daughters are precisely in focus. Why should our father's name be lost to his clan? It is not a rhetoric of personal empowerment. It is not primarily an assertion of their own rights to inherit. They were seeking to be the means to an end, the preservation of their father's name. Their unconventional demand was driven by a conventional piety.